thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. I just wonder if we can turn the clock back a little and Italy and the relationship between the Cumani families and the Dettori families and what it has spawned since then.
Well, it started a long time ago. My father appointed Frankie's father, Gianfranco, as his stable jockey many, many years ago. I think probably something like in the early 70s or something like that, or maybe 60s, late 60s. No, definitely mid 60s, I would say. And Gianfranco at the time was riding in Rome, but my father's stable was in Milan. And my father sort of kept an eye on him, and then he started giving him some rides, and then eventually he decided that he wanted him as stable jockey, and Gianfranco agreed. And I think it was an association that lasted many, many, many years. There was a brief time when Gianfranco was lured by more money from another stable, but then he came back to my father. And I think it probably lasted about 20 years.
And at what stage when did you come over to England then and would have first come across or become aware of Frankie, the son of?
Well, I came to England initially to work for Henry Cecil in 1972, and then I started training in 76, yeah, roughly. And I remember clearly one year, and I can't remember what year it was, but probably late 70s, early 80s, I went racing in Milan, and Gianfranco was riding one for my father. We were in the paddock, and Gianfranco said, my kid, I can't cope with him anymore, so I'm going to send him to you. And he waved him. He was standing outside the paddock, and he waved at him and made him come in. And he literally was that high at the time. He was 14. And so he introduced me to him and me to him. And he said, I'm going to send you, this will be your master when you go to Newmarket. Poor little Frankie, I don't know what he thought about. He hadn't even heard of Newmarket then, had never seen me before, so he must have been terrified. Not much terrifies Frankie anyway, but and that was it. And sure enough, I didn't think much about it. I thought it was one of those things that people say and nothing might come of it. But sure enough, about probably 9 months later, I got the call, and from Gianfranco, who said Frankie's on his way. And so we had to find him lodgings, and we had to gradually sort of work him into the yard. He'd never worked in a yard before, and I don't think he'd ever ridden a racehorse before. He'd only been riding ponies. And so it started from there. And I remember it started not so well for Frankie in a way, because he used to fall off quite often, particularly a horse called Dallas, who was quite a nice horse who won the Cambridgeshire. And he was a sweet horse, but from time to time he used to just take the mickey out of Frankie and drop him. And gradually Frankie learned very quickly from his mistakes, and learned to be a very good horseman and a very good rider.
I was going to say, I'm referring to when you mentioned when you first came, you fell off a lot, but you said no, you haven't seen anyone learn as fast and be able to, within a year, be able to be good enough to ride at Goodwood, I think, in his first, was it?
That's right. That's right.
Race?
Yeah.
What could you see about him that immediately clicked and, my God, we've got something special here?
Well, he was a very fast learner, as we discussed. He to begin with, he would fall off about 4 times in a week. Then he got down to twice in a week, and then none, and then he never fell off again. And then gradually, as he started riding more and more and began to ride work, you could see that he had this knack for making horses run for him, up to the point at which at times I had to tell him to cool it, because he was asking too much of the horses on the gallops. And there was a very famous story of, but at the same time I also had Jason Weaver as an apprentice, who became another champion jockey. And one morning they were riding 2 very good horses. I think they were Marco Distinction, multiple Group 1 winner, and Legal Case, multiple Group 1 winner. And they were just supposed to do an easy upside bit of work over 5 furlongs. And I was standing on my hack at the sort of 5 furlong marker, and they came by me, winging flat out and taking each other on. So I rode up to them as they were finished, as they were pulling up, And I said to both of them, I said, what the hell did you think you were doing there? You overdid it far too much. And Frankie turned around to me and said, I'm sorry, I thought I could hear the crowd.
Even at that age, he was...
He was cheeky.
He was cheeky.
Yeah.
But an awareness of, you know, the vibrancy and the whole, everything around him that could be coming up. You say the crowd and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You could picture himself maybe years ahead.
Yeah, probably. I think by the time when that gallop happened, I think Frankie had already been riding in races, because I remember him riding Legal Case to win, I think it was not the Superlative, but the Select Stake or something like that, a race that I don't think longer exists at Goodwood. And he rode him there because at the time Ray Cochran was my stable jockey, but he was injured. And so Frankie stepped in and rode quite a few winners at that time. And then he became my stable jockey the following year.
When he first came, this precocious 14, 15-year-old, had you ever seen him quite as with so much natural ability?
It was difficult to say, because he hadn't been on racehorses before, so it developed very quickly. That ability sort of emerged very quickly, whereas it takes maybe a normal 15-year-old 2 or 3 years to get to the stage where Frankie got to. He got there in a year.
And what was it about him? Was it his will to win, his passion, his exuberance, his desire, with that fire in his heart?
Yeah, all of those. And as I said, his ability to make his will to win travel down the reins into the horse's brain.
Because I remember you saying that he is the only jockey perhaps who, if he wants to win a race, he can make a horse win a race.
Yeah.
I think that was almost, yeah.
He's not the only one. There's other jockeys, but it'd be unfair to say that.
Unique.
Yeah, Frankie. One thing you knew when Frankie was riding for you, if a furlong out it was a head and head, you knew you were going to win that race, because he just had that ability to extract or make the horse want to win as much as he wanted.
And how did that transmit from jockey to horse?
Well, horses are amazing creatures, because they have this sixth sense. That's why horses can get nervous if a nervous person approaches them. They can be relaxed if a relaxed person approaches them. So horses have this way of communicating with humans. That's what happened with Frankie. You know, Frankie was able to transmit his will to win to the horses. Not that a horse knows when he wins a race, but because a horse doesn't know what a winning post is. However, he feels the urge of wanting to beat the other horse.
And that's primeval, isn't it? That's in
Yeah.
nature. And tell me a few things about Frankie being here. How long did he stay with you, and the role Arthur played in keeping in shape?
Well, I thought I had 2 yards at the time. They were joined up but slightly apart, sort of 500 meters apart through a paddock. And I thought the second yard, which was smaller, would be more suitable for Frankie. A, because he had a better chance of learning, because it was a smaller environment, so more easier for him to fit in. And secondly, because at the time I had a very good headlad down there called Arthur Taylor, who was an old school headlad. And I thought if there was anybody that could keep Frankie in order, in check, Arthur would be the guy to do so. And that's why Frankie worked there, and started from there until he became a fully fledged jockey when he no longer had to be in the yard.
I mean, I think you recall when Arthur was Winky, you said, I had to give him the bollocking today. Was that correct?
Yeah. No, Arthur was sort of, quite often he would come up to me and say, I really had to give him a bollocking because he went too far. He did this or he did that, and I hope you don't mind me. I said, Arthur, you're in charge of the boy. You go ahead, give him any bollockings that you see fit or that he deserves.
Did he have this ability, though, Frankie, to charm everyone, though?
Yeah.
Get him in the palm of his hand from very early.
Yeah. Everybody loved him. Everybody loved him, and everybody, no one was ever jealous. That's a testament to the man, or to the kid at the time, that he was making such rapid progress, and yet nobody was jealous of it.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned when Ray Cochran was here as your first jockey, he was injured, and that really gave Frankie the profile, perhaps, to demonstrate to the wider public, his innate skills.
Yeah, because up to then he was riding the sort of the second string horses, the ones that Ray couldn't ride. And when Ray got injured, Frankie stepped up and started riding the good horses in the big races. And for a couple of months, and he was lucky that my yard was in good form at the time, so he started winning group races, and that took him to the next level, and he became accepted as a group race rider.
And was it fortunate? Are we in the early 90s when Frankie had a run in with and he was going to go to Hong Kong, wasn't he?
Well, that was a major turning point in my life, his life, and still causes me great sadness what happened then. He'd been riding a year or two as my #1 jockey, and we've had great successes. And in those days there was no all weather in the winter, and the jockeys after the November handicap, the jockeys just used to disappear from the face of the earth, and they went on holiday, they went to ride in America, they went to ride in Australia, Hong Kong, wherever they went. And I remember sort of back January, February maybe, I started getting telephone calls from press people saying, "Is it true Frankie has signed up to go to Hong Kong?" And it took me totally by surprise, and I couldn't believe it. And I said, "No, it can't be true. He wouldn't be doing something like that at all." But then this carried on, and press people ringing up all the time saying, "We hear he signed up for Hong Kong." And I kept saying, "No, it's not true." But I couldn't get hold of him. We didn't have mobile phones at the time. I didn't know where he was, and I couldn't get hold of him. And so come middle of February, all of a sudden there's a knock on my the office door, and Frankie walks in with a big grin, and we sort of hug, and we go and sit down, and he says, "I'm going to ride in Hong Kong." And I felt my blood drain from me completely, because I could not believe it. Here was this great talent that had everything in front of him to be a big jockey, big name jockey throughout Europe and perhaps the world in time. And there he was chucking everything just to go and ride. At the time was a bit of a backwater racing nation, Hong Kong. And so I tried to dissuade him, and I talked to him for God knows how long, hours and hours. And he was determined. He said, "No, I'm going. No, I'm going." And then I lost my cool, and I said, if you don't change your mind, I'll never speak to you again." I was so angry. And so we left in very bad terms at the time. But then Frankie's always been a very lucky person, because not only was he lucky to come to England, not particularly to me, but to anybody he went to, but he was lucky to come to England. He then was very lucky that he went to an Arsenal game, because he was an Arsenal supporter, and he went to an Arsenal game with some friends. And as luck or bad luck for him would have it, he got stopped by the police. His car got stopped by the police, and the police found a minute amount of cocaine in the car, and that hit the news, and the news got to Hong Kong, and Hong Kong cancelled his contract straight away. And that was the greatest stroke of luck for Frankie, because otherwise, if he'd gone to Hong Kong, we would never known Frankie as we know him now.
So fate really did play a big part in keeping him here.
Yeah. Unfortunately, by then I burned my bridges with him, or we burnt each other's bridges, and so he had to start from scratch again. And he got lucky that John Gosden hadn't been in England that long, and I don't think he had a jockey at the time, so he started linking up with him, and it took off from there, and then from there onto good old Finn, and as we know the rest of the story.
So at that juncture, what was your emotion? Was it sadness? Was it gladness in a way that he had not gone to this backwater, but he wasn't with you? So that was very sad, yes, because I think we could have had a few more years together until a big job like Godolphin came. If that came along, then of course I couldn't have kept him, because that was a much bigger job than mine. But so it was sad. Yes, it was sad. But did you follow his career?
All the time, of course, all the time.
And how would you describe your relationship at that time? Was it almost you were a father to him, because he was this young, impressionable kid?
Until we had the fallout, yes, it was almost like that. And Sarah was was very, very protective of him, and yes, we treated him almost like a son, not quite, but almost.
Was there a sense that, did you feel a bit betrayed because of everything, the commitment and the love and the support and everything you've given him, and then he was gone?
Yeah, I felt really, really bad about the fact that he signed for Hong Kong without even talking to me about it. You know, I would have expected him maybe to come to me and say, "I've been offered this job in Hong Kong. What do you think?" And we could talk about it. But the fact that he went straight in and signed it, I can only assume is the fact that he was very young. He was only probably, what was it, then 19, maybe 20, and he'd spent 2 or 3 months riding in Hong Kong, and he was taken in by the easy life, the easy money there, the good life, and that to a young boy must be appealing, of course.
That was a sign of his impetuosity, perhaps, impulsiveness.
Yeah.
But that served him well in other ways, in other walks of his life.
Yeah, of course.
You know, he's not afraid to take a risk if he sees an opportunity, perhaps.
Yeah.
And when you were watching his career after he left you, what gave you most satisfaction? That he was fulfilling the ability that you knew he was born with, and he was there riding big race winner after big race winner, and then Godolphin came and he was setting the strategy.
I never had any doubt that he was going to get to the top. I knew that, and I told him that. And that's what made it so bad that he wanted to go to Hong Kong, because I said, "You're destined for the top. You're going to be you know, a top jockey in this country for many years to come." And so in a sense, I was proud of the fact that I for once had been right about predicting a bright future for him, and at the same time I was sad because that future was no longer with me.
But as you watched him, you know, develop. Gosden and then Godolphin. Did you think Godolphin would be it forever? I know it ended in a fairly another way.
It ended slightly acrimoniously. Was it? Look, who knows? Nothing is forever, as we know. But at the time, when they were going great guns, you thought that was going to last forever. But then strange things happened. You know, the Godolphin decided to bring in 2 more jockeys. I think it was Sylvester and Barcelona, and then all of a sudden there were 3 jockeys competing for rides in Godolphin, and Frankie was no longer the number 1 guy in there, so it made life a bit complicated. And Frankie probably didn't enjoy that the diminished status, and that gradually the whole thing fell apart in that setup.
And then it fell apart spectacularly, didn't it?
Yeah.
And, sorry.
When he took a ride for Coolmore in the Ark.
Yeah. And that was.
At the time, Coolmore and Godolphin weren't talking to each other at all. They were like Russia and Ukraine.
But does Frankie bear grudges? I mean, or is he one of these? You can have a disagreement with someone, but then 5 minutes later it's forgotten, or is it more deep?
That is something you may want to ask him. I've never seen him being having a grudge for anything or anybody. He does get low at times. If things aren't going right, then he can get low. And then perhaps that affects his riding as well, when things aren't going right and he gets a bit low. But then he comes out the other end. All it takes is a couple of good winners and he's back up on top and back up smiling and everything. But he and I probably didn't talk for possibly a year or 2. And then one day, I can't remember how it came about. He came to see me. And he knocked on the office door, and it was pouring with rain outside, and he opened the door, and with his grin he said to me, "Can I come in?" And I said, "No, you stay out there and get wet. When you're soaking wet, you can come in." And it was a bit of a joke, and he broke the ice, and then we started talking again. And then he started riding for me on occasions when he was available. I'd always wanted him, and we won some big races together. Not enough of them, but some big races like the Breeders' Cup and the Japan Cup and so on.
When he won, so sorry, when he left Godolphin, I think he felt a bit in the wilderness, didn't he?
Yeah.
He wasn't sure where he was going to go.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
felt, is that me finished? And did you have any contact with him in that period? When he
Not much, no. In fairness, not much, no. At the same, his plane accident. When was that? Was he with Godolphin then, or had he already finished with Godolphin? I can't remember now. Did he finish Godolphin?
2001?
I can't remember another year. But I remember going to see him in Ray in hospital, and then, but again, you see, that's again part of Frankie's luck. You know, how many people survive a plane crash? How many people are injured in a plane crash and have their flying companion, in this case Ray, that's not injured sufficiently to pull him out of the wreckage? So, you know, so again, lucky. And then I think that when he came back and things weren't going too well. Yes, he must have finished with Godolphin then. And I think 1 year he only had a handful of winners, or maybe 20 or something. And he wasn't riding very often, no, very well. And then all of a sudden, Sheikh Al-Shakab, Sheikh, what's his name, from Qatar, picked him up and...
Not Al-Thani, no.
Yeah, Al-Thani, yeah. Picked him up and gave him a contract, and he started riding again. And then he ended up with Gosnell again, and started with Gosnell again, and he's been with John for the last, I don't know, 15 years, whatever it is.
That was the second coming.
The second coming. And again, he was lucky. John didn't have a jockey at the time, because who was riding for him? Probably William Buick at the time, and Buick had gone to Godolphin.
Yeah.
And so John picked him up, and away they went.
And probably the most glorious 10, 15 years of his career. I mean, they won everything, didn't they?
Yeah.
And did that give you particular pleasure to see, enjoyment to see him bestriding the racing world?
It gave me pleasure. It would have given me more pleasure if he was on my horses. But apart from that, yes. I mean, I've always been very fond of Frankie. You know, I've known him for such a long time. I knew his father very well, and so he's always given me pleasure whenever he wins a race.
When you've looked at some of the big race wins he's had in the last 5, 10 years, has any one particular stood out for you as that encapsulates what Frankie's about and how he can make a horse win, almost? Or maybe one or two examples?
Can't think of any right now. I mean, he was great on Enable, we know that. He was fantastic on Enable. He was great on Golden Horn. That ride he gave Golden Horn, I think, in the Arc, that was fantastic. And some of his rides in America have been the Breeders' Cup have been worthy of note and worthy of remembering. But I can't remember one specifically. I mean, Frankie, when he's in form, there's no better jockey on earth. There never has been. I mean, he's on a par with a top-class Lester Piggott and a top-class Ryan Moore. There aren't any better that I can think of. And when he's on song, if I was a jockey against Frankie on song, I'd tear my hair out and thinking, how the hell do I beat this guy?
Did you sense that he was getting on? He was 50 not that long ago, and that it's not been about for him the number of winners; it's the quality of the winner. He sort of changed his approach, and did you know you could see that was an inevitable part of his growing older?
Well, he's changed his approach. He already had changed it when he was with Godolphin. Godolphin made him basically the Frankie that he is nowadays, just selective on what rides he has, as opposed to the Frankie that was chasing titles. And so he then became accustomed to the fact that he would only ride 4 days or 5 days a week. He wouldn't ride in every single race. He would be very selective. And he carried that on with John, and John allowed him to be like that, and John wouldn't ask him to go to a minor meeting on a Monday for 1 or 2 rides. And that actually is what made Frankie longevity, because it allowed him to not to be over stressed and fatigued by riding every day and driving every day and so on, and that made him last this long. However, I was disappointed when he announced that this would be his last year, because he was riding so well, and I've every time in the spring, every time he was winning a big race, I would send him a text and say, "What the hell do you think you're doing retiring? You're riding better than ever." And he would come back saying, "It's decided," and which sort of made me think, why should you have decided that? You're riding so well, you've got another 1, 2, 3, who knows how many more years ahead of you. There are jockeys, there's a famous jockey in America, Mike Smith, who I think is 55, 6, something like that, and he's still riding at the top of his game. So I tried to sort of persuade him that it wasn't, but he said he decided, and I can see why. You know, you have to, sooner or later it comes to all of us that time to retire and time to move on to greener pastures.
But it's been a sort of glorious end of year tour, or round the year tour, hasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, it's been fantastic.
Typical Frankie,
Yeah.
you know, winning here at Ascot and
Yeah.
the Epsom and everything,
Yeah.
jumping off, and you know, it's like there's a divine hand somewhere. But he's making a glorious exit.
Oh yeah, he's doing fantastic, and I'm so glad for him. And I'm resigned to the fact that he is retiring, so he tells me, and so I just all that's left for me is to applaud his career.
Gosden hinted not that long ago that perhaps it might not be the end. I mean, do you sense that, or you know Frankie so well? Once he's made his mind up, is that?
No. Everybody can change their minds, and Frankie is like all of us. He could change his mind. I think what is likely to happen is that there isn't a cut-off point for him to stop riding altogether. But I think once he goes to Breeders' Cup, he may stay in the States. He had a very good winter there last year, and he may be tempted to maybe have another winter and see how far he goes.
How lucky are we to have had him in this generation for what he's done for racing, what he stands for within racing, and almost single-handedly on his shoulders carrying the sport as a personality?
I've been very lucky. I mean, who knows where we'd be in racing if we hadn't had him. I mean, he's been a boost to racing. He's been an ambassador for racing. He's attracted people. People want to go racing because he's riding on the day. And no, he's been fantastic. He's been one of the best things that ever happened to racing.
And who's going to take over?
Somebody will.
Someone
will. I don't think it'd be somebody like him, because it's very difficult for two people to be exactly the same. But it'd be somebody that will fill the gap.
And just going back to his relationship with Gosden, I mean, was that another almost father-son thing? Or he likes to feel part of a team, doesn't he?
I think so. Definitely was until last year at Royal Ascot, when they had a major fallout. And who knows? Maybe that could be a contributing factor on his deciding to retire, because maybe John might have said to him, you know, when they reapproached after that brief sabbatical of 10 days or whatever, John might have said to him, you know, you're getting to the end, and your next year will be your last year with me, and that's made Frankie think. I don't know, I'm not privy to that discussion, but it makes me think that is a possibility. And Frankie might have thought, well, if I can't ride for John for another year after next, then I don't want to start from scratch again and go around begging for rides. So that might have made his mind up then. Who knows? It's a question for Frankie and John.
Will you be at Champions Day? Will you be there to sort of?
I'm certainly going to his dinner the evening after. There's a celebration dinner for Frankie at the Grosvenor. I think it's the Grosvenor. I'll certainly be there for that. Nowadays, I'm not a great race goer anymore, having spent 50 years of my life going racing as often as I had to. I really, truly enjoy watching racing on television, and I think that ITV does such a good job that, not just because my daughter is there, but generally, they do a very good job, and I quite enjoy watching it. And so what I might do, I watch it here and then drive to London and go to dinner.
It'll be a highly charged afternoon at Ascot.
Yeah.
Emotions running.
Yeah, definitely. And Frankie will make sure the emotions will be high for everybody.
He'll turn the dial up.
Yeah.
And just word about your own pride, as you say, your daughter's the lead, one of the leading commentators and presenters in horse racing in Britain and Australia. Your son is making a good, fantastic career for himself in Ballarat. That must give you great pride.
Yes, well, at least the line is continuing. So I'm not a bad stallion. Something is continuing, and Matt is doing very well. He's very happy. He's got 2 lovely kids. Francesca is doing great, and she's got 2 kids plus 1 in the offing that will be born in December. And so no, it's great. Sad that Francesca moved to Yorkshire, but it's understandable. But now, as she's in Yorkshire and Matt is in Australia, I'm fond of saying that now both my kids are living abroad.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. Sam, you may think there's other things to...
No, absolutely happy with that.
But no, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much, Luca.
Pleasure.